Dr. Kate Morrison had been working at Frontier Station 7 for almost 3 years now, and she thought she'd seen everything the galaxy could throw at her. The small medical facility floated in orbit around a dusty mining colony, serving as the only proper hospital for 6 different alien species within 3 sectors. Most days were routine, setting broken limbs for Velen miners, treating radiation burns on human cargo haulers, or diagnosing strange space viruses that made people sneeze in colors they didn't know existed. That Tuesday started like any other. Kate sat at her desk in the medical bay, scrolling through patient files on her data pad while sipping cold coffee. The station hummed quietly around her, the familiar vibration of the life support systems almost comforting in its predictability. She was halfway through updating a Velen patient's chart when the emergency alarms screamed to life. The sound made her jump, spilling coffee across her desk. Red warning lights flooded the medical bay, and the automated voice of the station's computer echoed through the corridors. Emergency docking procedure initiated. All personnel clear bay doors. Repeat, emergency docking in progress. Kate's heart hammered in her chest. Emergency dockings were rare, usually reserved for ships that were damaged or under attack. She grabbed her medical scanner from its charging station and ran toward the docking bay, her boots clanging against the metal floor. The massive docking doors groaned and screeched as they forced themselves open. Kate skidded to a stop at the entrance to the bay, her eyes going wide at the sight before her. A creature that looked like it had flown straight out of Earth's oldest fairy tales crashed through the opening with desperate, uncontrolled force. The being was enormous, easily 20 feet long from nose to tail, with wings that stretched even wider. But calling her a dragon didn't quite capture it. Her body was covered in crystalline formations that shimmered purple and gold, catching the harsh lights of the docking bay and throwing rainbows across the walls. The creature's wings scraped against the metal walls with a horrible grinding sound as she tumbled into the bay. She clutched something small and precious against her chest, protecting it even as she crashed and slid across the floor. Kate ran forward, her medical training overriding her shock. Up close, the alien was even more incredible. What looked like scales from a distance were actually living crystals growing from her skin, each one unique in shape and size. They clinked and chimed as the creature moved, creating an almost musical sound. The alien's chest heaved with exhaustion, her whole body trembling from effort. A small device attached to the creature's neck crackled to life, a universal translator. The voice that came through was feminine, desperate, and broken with emotion. "Human doctor, please. My child." They all say, "Too late." Kate's breath caught in her throat when she finally saw what the creature was holding. Cradled in massive claws that could easily crush a human was a small hatchling, barely the size of a 5-year-old child. But something was terribly wrong. The young alien lay completely still, its eyes closed. Its body was covered in strange, barnacle-like growths that pulsed with a sickly green light. The parasites, because that's what they had to be, were everywhere, clustered so thick on the hatchling's chest and neck that Kate could barely see the natural crystal scales beneath. Where the mother's crystals shimmered with vibrant purples and golds, the hatchlings had turned a dull, lifeless gray. The green glow from the parasites cast an unhealthy light across the small creature's face. "Everyone refuses," the mother whispered, and Kate could hear tears in that translated voice even though she didn't know if this species could cry. The alien's eyes, massive things each the size of a dinner plate, fixed on Kate with an expression that needed no translation. It was the look of a parent watching their child slip away, the universal desperation that transcended species and culture. Drethian doctors, Velen healers, even the Technarch surgeons. All say same thing. Too advanced. Too dangerous. My Kieran will die. Kate stared at the dying hatchling in the mother's arms. Her scanner was already running, taking readings, but she didn't need technology to tell her this was bad. Really bad. The kind of bad that made experienced doctors shake their heads and walk away. But Kate wasn't walking away. She'd heard the stories during her training at the academy. Stories about human doctors who'd accomplished the impossible, who'd looked at terminal cases and refused to accept defeat. Humans had a reputation in the galaxy. They were the species too stubborn to know when to quit, too crazy to understand that some problems couldn't be solved. Kate looked at the dying hatchling, then met the mother's desperate eyes. She thought about all the impossible cases in Earth's medical history, all the diseases that were once death sentences until some stubborn human refused to accept it. This was her moment. Her chance to prove that human stubbornness wasn't just a character flaw, it was a superpower. "Bring Kieran to the examination table," Kate said firmly, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "We're not giving up. Not today. Not ever." The Drethian mother's crystalline body seemed to brighten slightly, hope flickering across her alien features like light through a prism. Kate helped the Drethian mother carefully move little Kieran onto the examination table. The hatchling weighed almost nothing, which scared Kate more than anything else. The young alien should have been heavier, should have had more life in them. Instead, Kieran felt fragile, like picking up a bird with hollow bones. Kate activated her medical scanner, running it slowly over the hatchling's body. The device hummed and beeped, collecting data and displaying it on the holographic screen above the table. What Kate saw made her stomach drop. The parasites weren't anything like the barnacles she'd studied in Earth biology classes. Her scanner identified them as crucible mites, silicon-based organisms that existed in the darker corners of space. But these weren't just sitting on the surface. The detailed scans showed the horrifying truth. The mites had their feeding tubes buried deep into Kieran's crystalline structure, tapping directly into the bioelectric fields that powered the young Drethian's body. Kate's medical database pulled up information on crucible mites automatically. A bright red warning flashed across her screen: fatal to juvenile Drethians. No successful removal on record. Recommend palliative care only. Palliative care. That was doctor speak for, make them comfortable while they die. Kate clenched her jaw. She didn't come all the way out to the frontier to make dying kids comfortable. She came here to save lives. The Drethian mother settled herself on the floor beside the examination table, her massive form curling protectively around her child. She spoke through the translator, her voice heavy with exhaustion and grief. My name is Thelraya, she said. I have taken Kieran to 3 different medical centers on my homeworld. The best doctors our people have. They all tried to remove the mites. Kate looked up from her scanner. What happened? Thelraya's crystalline body seemed to dim, the colors fading slightly. Kieran's scales shattered. Our bodies are made of living crystal, doctor. It is beautiful, but it is also fragile in ways your soft human body is not. The first doctor tried to cut away the infected areas. Kieran's chest cracked like breaking glass. The mites burrowed deeper to escape the blade. Kate felt sick imagining it. She'd seen broken bones before, but breaking crystal scales that were part of a living body? That was a whole different nightmare. The second doctor tried using energy tools, Thelraya continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Precision lasers that could burn away the mites one by one. But the heat caused Kieran's scales to fracture. Dozens of small cracks spreading like a spiderweb across my child's body. And still the mites went deeper. And the third doctor? Kate asked quietly. Chemical treatment. Acid designed to dissolve the mite's silicon structure. It worked on the surface parasites, but the ones buried deep survived. And the acid weakened Kieran's scales even more. Thelraya made a sound that the translator couldn't interpret, something between a sob and a growl. Every treatment left my child worse than before. Every doctor gave the same answer. The mites are too deep, too integrated. Kieran's neural pathways are developing around the parasites now. Any attempt to remove them will either shatter my child's body or destroy the developing brain. Kate stared at her scanner readings. The mites weren't just feeding on Kieran, they'd become part of the hatchling's biological system. She could see where the parasites had wrapped themselves around developing neural clusters, where they'd integrated with the bioelectric channels that carried signals through Kieran's crystalline body. How long? Kate asked. 2 weeks, Thelraya said. Maybe 3 if we are fortunate. The mites will drain all of Kieran's energy. My child will simply fade away. Kate paced back and forth across the medical bay, her boots clicking on the metal floor. Her mind raced through everything she knew about parasites, about treatment options, about biology and medicine. The Drethian doctors had tried cutting, burning, and dissolving. All direct attacks on the mites themselves. All failures. The mites feed on bioelectric energy, Kate muttered, more to herself than to Thelraya. And every time someone tries to remove them physically, the trauma causes more damage. The mites burrow deeper to escape, and Kieran's scales fracture from the pressure. Yes, Thelraya confirmed quietly. Our physiology is rigid, doctor. Crystalline structures are strong, but they cannot bend without breaking. The mites evolved knowing this. They burrow into crystalline life forms because they know we cannot reach them without destroying ourselves. Kate stopped pacing. She turned to look at Kieran lying so still on the examination table, the green glow of the parasites pulsing slowly like a sick heartbeat. Then she looked at her own hand, soft flesh, flexible joints, bones that could break and heal stronger. This was the problem right here. This was why every Drethian doctor had failed. They were thinking about the problem using their own biology as a reference. Crystal structures. Rigid systems. hard materials that shattered under stress. But Kate was human. She'd grown up on a planet where life was soft and squishy and adaptive, where broken bones knitted themselves back together, where skin could stretch and flex, where the human body had 1,000 different ways to heal itself that didn't involve rigid structures. An idea started forming in Kate's mind. A crazy idea. The kind of idea that made sense only if you completely abandoned conventional thinking. What if, Kate said slowly, turning to face Thelraya, we don't try to remove them at all? Thelraya's massive head snapped up, confusion clear in her crystalline features. I do not understand. If we do nothing, the mites will kill Kieran. Kate pulled up a chemical diagram on the holographic display, her fingers flying across the controls. We don't do nothing. We do something completely different. Something no Drethian doctor would think of because they're thinking like Drethians. She zoomed in on the mite's biological structure, highlighting the parts that fed on bioelectric energy. Human medicine figured something out a long time ago. Sometimes you don't fight the parasite directly. You don't try to kill it or cut it out. Instead, you change the environment. You make the host so inhospitable that the parasites want to leave on their own. Thelraya stared at the diagram, trying to understand. Change the environment? But Kieran is the environment. You cannot change my child's body. Kate smiled for the first time since this nightmare began. That's where you're wrong. That's exactly what human medicine does best. We change what's inside the body all the time. We trick it, we manipulate it, we make it do things nature never intended. For the first time since crashing through the docking bay doors, something like hope flickered across Thelraya's face. The crystals on her body seemed to brighten just a little. Can you really do this? The mother asked, her voice trembling. Kate looked at the dying hatchling, then back at Thelraya. She thought about all the impossible medical breakthroughs in human history. All the times doctors had been told something couldn't be done, and they'd done it anyway. I'm going to try, Kate said firmly. Because that's what humans do. We look at impossible problems and we find impossible solutions. We don't give up just because everyone else already has. Kate sent Thelraya to get some rest in one of the station's larger cargo bays, the only space big enough for a full-grown Drethian to sleep comfortably. The mother didn't want to leave, but Kate insisted. What she was about to attempt would take hours, maybe days, and she needed to focus without worrying about an anxious parent watching her every move. Once Thelraya reluctantly left, Kate locked herself in the medical bay's laboratory. The small room was cluttered with equipment. Synthesizers, analyzers, chemical storage units, and computers running complex biological simulations. She pulled up every file she had on human antiparasitic medications, spreading the data across multiple holographic screens that floated around her workspace. The coffee maker in the corner became her best friend as the station's artificial night cycle began. Kate worked with intense concentration, her fingers dancing across keyboards and touch screens. She started with the basics. Medications humans had used for centuries to fight parasites. Things like ivermectin derivatives, antihelmintic compounds, and enzyme inhibitors. But those were designed for carbon-based earth parasites, and the crucible mites were silicon-based aliens. She needed to bridge that gap. Kate pulled up the periodic table, highlighting rare earth elements that could interact with silicon-based biology. Yttrium, lanthanum, neodymium, elements that most people had never heard of but that had unique electromagnetic properties. She ran simulation after simulation, testing how these elements might interact with Drethian bioelectric fields. Around 3 in the morning she had a breakthrough. By combining human antiparasitic medication with specific rare earth elements, she could create a compound that would alter the frequency of bioelectric energy without harming the host. It was like changing the radio station. The mites were tuned to one frequency, but Kate could shift Kieran's body to broadcast on a completely different channel. The synthesizer hummed and whirred as it created the compound, molecule by molecule. Kate watched the progress bar crawl across the screen, triple-checking her calculations. One mistake, one wrong ratio, and she could kill Kieran faster than the mites would. By dawn, she had a vial of clear liquid that had never existed anywhere in the galaxy before. Her hands shook slightly as she held it up to the light. This was it. This was either going to save Kieran's life or prove that Kate had been foolishly overconfident. She called Thelraya back to the medical bay. The Drethian mother looked like she hadn't slept at all, her crystalline scales dull with worry. Together, they stood over Kieran's still form on the examination table. This will take 48 hours, Kate explained as she loaded the compound into an injection device. The treatment will gradually change Kieran's bioelectric output. To the mites, it's going to feel like their food source is turning poisonous. They'll want to leave to find a better host. Kate had set up specialized containment fields around the examination table, invisible energy traps that would capture the mites as they fled Kieran's body. She couldn't let them escape into the station. These parasites were dangerous and she needed to contain every single one. She administered the first injection directly into Kieran's neck, where the bioelectric channels were strongest. The compound was absorbed immediately, beginning its slow work of shifting the hatchling's energy frequency. Then came the hardest part, waiting. The first 6 hours felt like 6 years. Kate sat at her monitoring station, staring at readouts and graphs that showed Kieran's bioelectric field slowly shifting. The mites remained firmly attached, still feeding, still draining the hatchling's life away. Kate adjusted the treatment every 2 hours, fine-tuning the frequency shift, pushing it gradually higher. Thelraya never left her child's side. The massive Drethian mother curled her body protectively around the examination table, her crystalline scales chiming softly whenever she moved. She didn't speak much, but Kate could feel the weight of her hope and fear filling the medical bay. Kate grabbed another cup of coffee, her 8th? 9th? She'd lost count. The station's crew brought her meals that she barely touched. All her attention was locked on those monitors, watching for any sign that the treatment was working. At hour 12 something changed. Kate's scanner caught movement, subtle, almost invisible but definitely there. One of the mites on Kieran's shoulder was loosening its grip. The parasite seemed confused, its feeding tubes retracting slightly as it sensed the changing energy signature. It was like watching someone realize their food had gone bad. The mite pulled free completely, its barnacle-like shell releasing from Kieran's crystalline scale with a tiny popping sound. Immediately, it flew toward the edge of the table, seeking escape. But Kate's containment field caught it, trapping the parasite in a stasis bubble where it floated, frozen in place. "It's working," Kate breathed, her exhaustion forgotten in a rush of excitement. Thelraya's head shot up, her eyes wide with hope. "The mite, it left?" "One down," Kate said, checking her scanner. "About 47 more to go." Over the next 36 hours the exodus continued. The mites fled one by one as Kieran's bioelectric field became increasingly incompatible with their feeding mechanisms. Some left quickly, practically jumping off the hatchling's body. Others fought to maintain their hold, trying to dig deeper, but Kate's treatment was relentless. She kept adjusting the frequency higher and higher, making Kieran's energy output completely toxic to the parasites. It was like watching rats flee a sinking ship. The containment fields filled with trapped mites, dozens of the ugly things floating in stasis bubbles around the examination table. Kate didn't sleep. She stayed at her post, monitoring every change, ready to adjust the treatment if anything went wrong. Thelraya brought her food and water, wordlessly supporting the human doctor who was saving her child. By hour 48, the last mite detached. Kate watched it on her scanner, the stubborn parasite finally giving up its hold on Kieran's spine and fleeing toward the containment field. Trap. Done. Finished. Kieran's scales, freed from the parasitic drain for the first time in months, began to change. The dull gray color slowly shifted, hints of color emerging like sunrise breaking through clouds. Faint opalescent shimmers, purple, gold, blue, rippled across the hatchling's body. Then Kieran's eyes fluttered open. Thelraya made a sound that Kate's translator couldn't handle, pure joy mixed with relief and disbelief. The mother gathered her child close, careful of the fragile scales, tears streaming down her crystalline face. Kate smiled, but something on her scanner made that smile fade. She ran a deep scan of Kieran's body, and her heart sank at what she saw. "The mites are gone," Kate said quietly, hating to dampen Thelraya's joy. "But they've left damage. These microfractures throughout Kieran's scales, they're everywhere." In Drethian physiology, this kind of structural damage would take decades to heal naturally. Thelraya's happiness dimmed like a light fading. "Then we have saved Kieran from the mites, only to leave my child fragile forever. Unable to fly properly. Unable to live a normal life." Kate stared at the scans showing the spiderweb of cracks throughout Kieran's crystalline structure. Any Drethian doctor would say the case was closed, patient saved from immediate death but permanently disabled. But Kate wasn't a Drethian doctor. She was human. And humans didn't stop halfway. "Not if I have anything to say about it," Kate said, her jaw set with determination. Kate stood in front of her medical console, her eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep but burning with determination. The mites were gone, but Kieran's body was a mess of microfractures, thousands of tiny cracks running through the crystalline scales like broken glass. Any Drethian doctor would have stopped here, satisfied with saving the patient's life even if it meant permanent disability. But Kate wasn't satisfied. Not even close. She pulled up every research file the station had on crystalline biology. Then she added human bone regeneration studies. Then synthetic materials engineering. Her holographic screens multiplied until they surrounded her in a glowing cocoon of data and diagrams. What she was considering had never been attempted anywhere in the galaxy, taking human medical techniques and applying them to completely alien physiology at the molecular level. Human bones break and heal stronger, Kate explained to Thelraya, who watched from beside Kieran's bed. When a human breaks an arm or a leg, the body doesn't just repair it. It reinforces it. Makes it tougher than it was before. Our bodies generate new tissue, add extra calcium, strengthen the damaged areas. Thelraya's crystalline head tilted in confusion. But Kieran is not human. We are crystal, not bone. Our structures do not regenerate like soft tissue. Not naturally, no, Kate agreed, her fingers flying across the keyboard. But what if we could teach Kieran's body to do it anyway? What if we could trick the crystalline structure into behaving more like human bone? The Drethian mother looked skeptical but said nothing. She'd already seen Kate accomplish the impossible once. Maybe she could do it again. Kate worked for 72 hours straight. She didn't go to her quarters. She didn't sleep. The station's crew brought her meals that she ate with one hand while working with the other. She kept herself going with stimulants, little pills that pushed back exhaustion but couldn't eliminate it. Her vision got blurry around the edges, and her hands developed a fine tremor, but she refused to stop. She designed something that had never existed before, a nanoscale scaffolding system. Microscopic frameworks so tiny that millions of them could fit on the head of a pin. These frameworks would be injected directly into Kieran's damaged crystal structure, where they would serve as templates, guides showing the body where and how to rebuild itself. But the scaffolding was only half the solution. Kate also needed to stimulate growth, and that's where human biology came in. She took human growth hormones, the same chemicals that help children grow and broken bones heal, and modified them at the molecular level. She adjusted the chemical structure, adapted the delivery mechanism, calibrated the dosage for a silicon-based life form instead of a carbon-based one. The station's AI kept interrupting her work with warnings. The computer's calm, neutral voice would chime in every few hours. Dr. Morrison, this procedure has no precedent in medical literature. Failure probability calculated at 67%. Potential outcomes include complete crystalline collapse, neural damage, systematic organ failure, or override warnings, Kate snapped, not looking up from her work. Authorization Morrison Delta 9. Override accepted, the AI replied. However, I must note for the record that you are operating outside established medical protocols. Yeah, well, established medical protocols already gave up on this patient, Kate muttered. So we're writing new ones. Thelraya watched Kate work with growing concern. The human doctor's movements had become jerky and uncoordinated. Her eyes had dark circles underneath them that looked like bruises. When she reached for her coffee cup, her hand shook so badly that she spilled half of it. The Drethian mother placed one massive claw gently on Kate's shoulder. The touch was surprisingly delicate for something so large. You are exhausted, human doctor. You push yourself beyond safe limits. Perhaps you should rest before attempting this procedure. Kate met Thelraya's worried gaze. Her own eyes were red and watery, but fierce with determination. That's what humans do. We don't stop when it's hard. We don't stop when it's dangerous. We don't even stop when everyone tells us we're being stupid and reckless. We stop when the job is done. The procedure itself took 16 hours. Kate carefully injected the nanoscale scaffolding into each damaged area of Kieran's crystalline structure. She used high-powered microscopes to guide the injections, watching on screens as the tiny frameworks spread through the cracks like roots growing through soil. Each injection had to be precise. Too shallow and the scaffolding wouldn't take hold, too deep and she risked damaging Kieran's neural pathways. Her hands cramped from holding the injection device steady. Her back ached from hunching over the examination table. Her eyes burned from staring at microscope screens for hours on end. But she kept going, injection after injection, until the scaffolding was in place throughout Kieran's entire body. Then came the growth hormone treatment. Kate administered carefully calibrated doses designed to stimulate crystal regeneration at an accelerated rate. This was the most dangerous part. Too much hormone and Kieran's body might try to grow too fast, creating weak or malformed crystals. Too little and nothing would happen at all. For the first 3 hours after the treatment, nothing happened. Kate sat at her monitoring station, staring at the readouts with increasingly desperate eyes. Her hands trembled as she checked and rechecked her calculations. Had she made a mistake? Had she gotten the dosage wrong? Was she about to watch all her work fail? Thelraya sat beside her child, humming something that the translator couldn't interpret, probably a Drethian lullaby. The sound was beautiful and sad and hopeful all at once. Then at hour 4, Kate's scanner showed something that made her heart leap. New crystal formations were beginning to grow along the scaffolding. Tiny at first, barely visible even on the high-resolution scans, but definitely there. The growth was following the nanoscale frameworks exactly as Kate had designed, using them as templates to rebuild the damaged structure. But these weren't purely Drethian crystals. They were something new, hybrid formations that combined Kieran's natural crystalline biology with the synthetic support system Kate had created. The new crystals were denser, more organized, with a molecular structure that looked like a beautiful geometric pattern. By hour 12, Kieran's scales were regenerating at a rate that should have been impossible. The fractures were disappearing, filled in by the new hybrid crystals. The dull gray color was being replaced by brilliant, vibrant hues, purple and gold and blue, shimmering with an inner light that seemed even brighter than before. Kate watched the transformation with tears streaming down her face. She was too tired to wipe them away. At hour 16, Kieran's eyes opened fully for the first time since the treatment began. The young Drethian sat up slowly, looking around with clear, alert eyes. The hatchling scales gleamed like jewelry under the medical bay lights, brighter and more beautiful than any young Drethian Thelraya had ever seen. Mother? Kieran's voice was small and confused but strong. Clear. Alive. Thelraya made a sound that Kate's translator gave up trying to interpret. Something raw and primal that was clearly joy and relief and love all mixed together. The dragon mother gathered her child close, and their crystal scales chimed together like bells, creating a musical sound that filled the medical bay. Kate slumped in her chair, utterly exhausted but smiling wider than she had in years. She'd done it. Against all odds, against all logic, against the advice of every established medical protocol in the galaxy, she'd done it. The impossible patient was healed. 3 weeks passed and Frontier Station 7 felt different to Kate. Lighter somehow, like the weight of impossible odds had been lifted from her shoulders. She'd proven something to herself, that human stubbornness wasn't just a character flaw. It was a medical tool. The station's recreation dome had become Kieran's favorite place. The massive spherical room used artificial gravity generators to create a zero-gravity environment in the center, perfect for species that could fly. Kate stood at the observation window, watching the young Drethian soar through the open space with a grace that took her breath away. Kieran executed a perfect spiral loop, then dove straight down before pulling up at the last second. The hatchling scales caught the artificial sunlight streaming through the dome's transparent panels, throwing rainbows across the walls. Other young aliens played in the dome too, a pair of Velen children, a human kid from the mining colony, even a Technarch juvenile that looked like a floating jellyfish made of light. They all stopped to watch Kieran fly. "Your child moves like an artist," Kate said to Thelraya, who stood beside her at the window. The dragon mother barely fit in the observation area, her massive form taking up most of the available space. "Kieran moves better than I did at that age," Thelraya admitted, her voice filled with wonder. "Better than most adult Drethians if I am being honest. The way the scales catch and release energy during flight, it is more efficient than natural biology should allow." Kate pulled up her medical scanner, she carried the thing everywhere now, and ran a quick scan of Kieran through the observation window. The readings confirmed what Thelraya was seeing. The hybrid crystalline structure Kate had created wasn't just healed. It was enhanced. The synthetic scaffolding had integrated so perfectly with Kieran's natural biology that it had created something new. Something better. The young Drethian scales were more resilient to impacts, bouncing off the dome walls during play with barely a scratch. They were more efficient at absorbing and converting energy, allowing Kieran to fly longer and faster without getting tired. Most remarkably, Kate's scanner showed that the hybrid crystals were capable of self-repair. Small damages that would take weeks to heal in a normal Drethian were fixing themselves in hours. "You have given me back my child's life and future," Thelraya said quietly, her massive eyes fixed on Kieran. "But I do not understand how. How does your species accomplish what entire civilizations deem impossible? The Drethians have studied medicine for thousands of years. The Technarchs have technology beyond anything your people possess. Yet it was a single human working alone in a small station, who succeeded where all of them failed." Kate smiled, thinking of all the impossible medical cases she'd studied back in school. Stories of doctors who'd cured diseases everyone said were incurable. Surgeons who'd performed procedures everyone said were too dangerous. Researchers who'd found answers everyone said didn't exist. We have a saying on Earth, Kate explained. Terminal just means we haven't found the answer yet. Humans are stubborn. We're too dumb to know when we're beaten, too arrogant to accept that something can't be done just because it hasn't been done before. We look at a problem that's defeated everyone else and we think, yeah, but they weren't human. Thelraya made a sound that might have been a laugh. That is not intelligence. That is madness. Maybe, Kate agreed. But it's the kind of madness that saves lives. Word of Kieran's recovery spread through the frontier systems faster than Kate expected. Within a week, her communication console was flooded with messages. Drethian physicians requesting consultations. Medical researchers asking for her data. Universities wanting her to speak at conferences. The message that surprised her most came from the Drethian High Council itself. They offered her a position as Chief Xenomedicinal Consultant, a title that came with a massive research facility, unlimited funding, and a salary that made Kate's eyes go wide when she saw the numbers. She could have anything she wanted. State-of-the-art equipment. A team of brilliant assistants. Recognition as one of the greatest doctors in the galaxy. Kate spent about 30 seconds considering it before typing her response. I appreciate the offer more than I can express, she wrote. But I have to decline. My place is here at Frontier Station 7. This station gets all the cases that everyone else has given up on. All the patients that other doctors have declared hopeless. Someone needs to be here to tell them that impossible is just another word for, no one's tried the right way yet. Someone needs to be here to be too stubborn to let them die. I guess that someone is me. The day before Thelraya and Kieran were scheduled to depart, the Dragon Mother asked to speak with Kate privately. They met in the medical bay where this whole impossible journey had started. Thelraya reached up to her own shoulder and, with a sound like breaking glass, removed one of her scales. Not just any scale, one of Kieran's new hybrid formations that the young Drethian had shed naturally during growth. The scale shimmered with colors that seemed to shift and change as Kate looked at it. In Drethian culture, Thelraya explained, freely giving a scale is the highest honor. It creates a bond that transcends species, distance, even death. This scale belongs to you now, human doctor. You are family. Kate took the scale with trembling hands. It was warm to the touch, still carrying a faint bioelectric charge. She could feel it humming gently against her palm. You saved my child, Thelraya continued, her voice thick with emotion. But you did more than that. You showed us that thinking differently, refusing to accept limits, is not recklessness. It is hope. It is possibility. That is the human way. The next day, Kate stood at the observation window and watched their ship depart. The scale hung on a chain around her neck, warm against her skin. Her communication console was already showing the next patient scheduled to arrive, a case that 3 different hospitals had refused to treat. Another impossible situation. Kate smiled and got back to work. Because that's what humans did best. They looked at impossible and asked, why not? And then they made it possible.